Hi, Anti-Society. Welcome back to the Antisocial Blend. Today we are checking out another Dreamcatcher album, this time Dystopia Road to Utopia, which is a bit of a tongue twister for me. There's too many similar words next to each other. We left off on a bit of an ominous note, though, because I get that we're ending off the Dystopia part storyline set of albums, but with Odd Eye, it was definitely this feeling of we lost. I get it. It's just Dystopia is the name of the whole collection of stuff going on. So it wasn't exactly going to be a good ending, but it still made me a little sad. It's like when I got to the end of the nightmare stuff, I'm like, wait, did we get out? Are we still stuck in the nightmare? What's going on? It feels a little bit like that. Maybe we'll get to some other stuff because this is Road to Utopia. I'm hopeful that we're gonna get to some other stuff, especially since the last song on this album is called New Days. So maybe we'll get a bit of an uplifting moment. Maybe they'll completely rip my heart out. Who knows? But excited to another album under my belt and some songs that people have been asking me to check out for a while. That being said, I know that Poison Love, again, has a self-made MV. We're gonna get to it in a future point, because if I watch it during this, I won't be able to pay attention to the song because I'll be too distracted by their chaos. So I'll watch that separately on a different point. But with that, we're just gonna get into the intro. All right, always love a good intro. I also like the fact that this is one, like it's bringing in the columns and the almost like Greek imagery that we've seen in some of the music videos, but also the like stark white of it feels interesting. Like it has this, I don't know, it has an interesting vibe to the aesthetic of it, especially since we have like this frame with all of the like carvings and stuff, again pulling from that like Greek or like older styles of like architecture. And then the logo itself for the Dreamcatcher is very like geometric, sharp lines, feels more futuristic. So like the contrast of those two things, of the traditional and the futuristic, is just like an interesting dynamic for me. Anyway, continue with getting into the intro. Ooh, okay. Starting with some drums. Ooh, don't do that to me. Don't give me a heavy percussion right off the bat. What are all these synths? So many windups. I'm sorry, we just like rave for a second. Hang on. Okay, I know that I can say this for multiple Dreamcatcher songs, and some of them completely factually of it sounds like it should be in an anime, because some of that is in fact true. It should be in like an anime or like a video game, right? But this one specifically, not to go on like a whole tangent, reminds me of the show Psycho-Pass. Like it feels like it should go to that, which kind of fits with the whole like dystopia thing. If you've watched that anime, you know that there's some stuff going on. Which now I'm thinking about it, what was it, Rose Blue, where we had the deal with the gun? Now that I'm thinking multiple layers now, I'm like, I feel like there's more connections there than I thought of before this moment. But the music style reminds me of that, like a very like electronic, synthy, like off kilter. There's all these windups and then release of tension, wind up, release of tension. It's interesting, and then having this almost full on rave feeling drop partway through. Are we gonna have another one of these moments in the album? I'm always down for a dance track. Ooh, love that stutter in the synths. A little more of an uplifting synth, but also, ooh. Sorry, I love that wind up into this almost release of tension with those like higher drums coming in. But I was also thinking, this is all synth, right? This is all electronic instruments. Usually we'll get a mixture. I know that electric guitar is, it's in the name, it's also electric. But usually we'll get instruments that are like physically, you play them, that are mixed in with the instrumentation. More traditional rock, electric guitars, basses, drum kits. You'll get an actual tangible instrument. We'll also get other string instruments mixed in with the more electronic sounds. That's what I'm used to, especially with the Dystopia albums. But this one is like all synth, right? This is all like MIDI and samples, which is interesting. Unless, of course, I don't think so. I'm like, unless the drums, the higher drums are a physical drum kit, but they don't sound like they are, which is also very interesting because the whole like storyline that we were going through, part of the story for all of the music videos was how we engage with like social media and like digital content, and the stripping of a lot of empathy that comes with interacting with people or having a lot of socialization through social media, and especially through the lens of what was going on with the K-pop industry at the time that these albums were coming out. That was very much a topic that was at the forefront of discussion, and I think that it's really interesting to have this transition. I'd have to go back and hear some of the intros again back to back, but it feels like this transition from that mixture of sounds. Yeah, there's physical instruments and digital ones, so that mixture of digital and tactile experience into this full digital experience, which given the end of Odd Eye, it feels like that, right? Like feels like this loss to the way that we engage with social media and digital content, and losing that connection with the physical world. And we had the tree that died, right? That form of nature and being out in the physical world and nurturing that has withered because we have turned to digital forms of entertainment and engagement and socialization instead. So it's just really interesting to have an intro like that. Maybe it'll switch. We still have a little bit of time left in it, but it's interesting to have that dynamic just in the intro. I love the intro so much. I love just how they really set up what the album is going to be. If you listen sonically, they're telling the story of the album, and I just find that so fascinating. But like, I hope we get like a rave moment in one of the songs. Also, like the synth, it almost sounds like a alarm too. Ooh, I love those little like stutters in it too. Ooh, I love those stutters. I love the wind-ups too. There's all these moments of wind-up, building, and then it crashes out, and then building, crashes out, and then these stutterings, even when we get to after an actual drop and we have all of these synths open up, all this instrumentation, we still have those stutters where it literally everything cuts out and you just have the stutter of the synth. And I find that really interesting because it's all these false starts, right? It's all this buildup of tension and then nothing. Buildup of tension, nothing. Buildup of tension, you get this momentum and then it stutters and goes out, right? It's all this feeling of maybe we're making ground, maybe we're actually able to make some kind of impact, and then hitting a wall, right? Hitting a barrier, tripping, falling, actually not getting the outcome that we wanted. I think that's such an interesting thing to bring into the instrumentation, even though it has all of this dance, rave, upbeat escapism, right? I feel like a lot of the times the reason that we engage with social media and digital media in general is the escapism. And I think like a lot of us that are into K-pop, that's a huge part of it. We're like, I just need to see people having fun and being chaotic and step away from some of the dark stuff that's going on in the world and just be in a little bit of a happy place for just a second and listen to fun music and watch fun little dances and stuff like that. There's an escapism to our enjoyment of K-pop and music and other forms of media. And I feel like that is also true of going out dancing and like raves and stuff like that. Not that I'm like a huge, I've never been to a rave, so I don't know, but there's an escapism to let me just have fun in this moment, and having that be like interrupted by these stutters and starts and empty space in the song of you can't actually escape it though. Just because you need to take some time and you sit and you listen to your favorite song or something doesn't mean that the problem goes away. It's just like you needed a break for a second and now you can come back when you're less overwhelmed, and you have to, but you still have to deal with the problem. The problem didn't go away because you went and watched Dreamcatcher Mind. It might make it easier to deal with that problem because you're not overwhelmed anymore, but it isn't actually going to solve the problem that's there. So I just think that's a really interesting concept that I'm getting from just the instrumentation of it. I also noticed that we have wings, angel wings, that has come up in other stuff too. I'm thinking of Handang in Justice. She also had the wings, which I know is later on and is going to other concepts, but they definitely have overarching things where they just pull certain motifs throughout. There's still things, stuff that I'm finding where I'm like, that feels like we're deliberately talking about the Nightmare storyline. So I feel like that is probably something that we're pulling along. Again, especially with this, where it's like an injustice, right? We get to the end of this story and it feels like an injustice. It's road to Utopia. We know that there's a direction we have to get to, but we're not there yet. And Apocalypse is like the next set of albums. There's a journey happening here. We're not just going to end up at Utopia. There is an injustice mixed in with that loss and the issues that they're talking about throughout the album and the previous songs and singles and stuff. Interesting. Not to ramble on about an intro. I know people are like, how can you talk that much about an intro? But clearly you underestimate my abilities. All right, Wind Blows. I know that there are performances of this. There's choreo. It's so good to see all 7 of them. Take a moment. I don't know why Gio looks like that though. Anyway, no, I'm sorry. I just looked over at Thami. Not the 2 of you, okay? I don't even talk about Xian. All y'all need to stop, okay? You should take a note from Handang and Sua's notebook and not look directly at me. Thanks. Wind Blows could be good. It could be bad. We could get some more storm imagery that we've had in other parts of theirs. I'm thinking of Sahara and stuff where it was talking about basically being pelted by sand and wind and storms brewing and you being stuck in that turmoil. Or it could be wind blows of things pass and then you can move on, maybe? I don't know. We're gonna find out. Oh, is this gonna be my more rave moment? Ooh, nasty production. Ooh, okay, I know that we're building up with that drum. Sorry, I got shivers when Handang came in. I'm so happy that I'm back with her being in the songs. It just feels right. Nasty production at the beginning. I mean that with the most compliment I possibly can. Okay, so we have the coming in nonstop. That kind of goes what I was talking before about this turmoil of wind kind of pelting at them, the storm coming in at them and feeling like there's no escape, right? Like if you're in the middle of a storm, I guess not the middle because sometimes the middle is the calmest part, but if you're stuck in a storm, it feels like it's surrounded by all sides. Like how do you get out, right? Storms in nature are just like a natural cycle of weather and the way that our planet works, that it's like this, it feels like this cosmic force around you. That's what do you do in that instance, right? Like when you feel like nature itself is against you. And I think interesting given the contrast between like digital and nature throughout a lot of these albums and like concepts of being able to contrast those two things of wind being both like a natural force but also something that we can generate, something that we can use and manipulate to our own means in terms of energy or using it for different purposes. It's just interesting to have those two contrasts. Confusing sounds is interesting too. It's not just being like battered around physically, but there's so much noise around, which I think going into social media is interesting to just have so much going on. City lights, stars that you can't see. Stars, again, always makes me think of their connection with fans, right? They talk about their fans being like points of light in the darkness. So saying if we're engaging with social media, it's like, hey, there's so many people talking at me that I can't actually find the people that are my fans, the people that I should be engaging with, that I should be reading comments about, that I should be like sharing this experience with, because there's so much else going on. And it's blurring out my ability to see that, right? There's too much light now for me to have that experience. They've talked a lot about finding like solitude and darkness. And again, this is at them at their upswing, right? Of people like really starting to get into the group. I've had lots of people talking about like the last like couple of music videos I've done, them being like, this was my first Dreamcatcher music video. This is where I started my journey with them. That, you know, this is really where there's a much harsher spotlight on them and on K-pop in general. Like we're talking about a time when there was so much attention put to K-pop in a way that there hadn't before. So it's like there's too much light shining on us now. We can't actually see those points of light that are us trying to find our bearings, which is interesting too. And then blow wind so that I can see you, like this almost like cloud cover. Like I need, again, like I was talking about, like wind blows things out of the way, things pass. So it's like I need the cloud cover to pass so I can finally see that and get my bearings again and understand why I'm doing something and get that kind of like solitude and that camaraderie and direction again. Maybe? Gorgeous vocals. I love stripping back everything. And then this drum. Ooh. Ooh, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Ooh. Nasty production. We're gonna go back, don't worry. Speaking of, okay, this is like I'm talking about in the intro of like anime feeling. This has that feeling of that huge lift up in the chorus, right? Which is like, I'm gonna reconnect. Again, this feels very much of a connecting with fans, or like connecting with the core people that you know care about you, right? And I know like when this album was coming out, this is in lockdowns and not being able to be with people a little bit after some of the extreme wave of it, because we do have Handong back of it for this part, but it is that experience of not being able to connect with fans face to face. So you're using social media. Social media has its own detriments, like its own issues and turmoil. Their popularity is gaining. K-pop's popularity is gaining. There's a lot of eyes on them through social media that it is like making that experience difficult for them to actually like connect with people. And like seeing people say, reading comments of people saying like loving their music or the things that they're putting out, or really appreciating that they're continuing to make stuff, is not the same as being in a room of people and being able to see them doing fan meets and actually being able to engage with them face to face. And it's very difficult to be a performer and not have that part of it, right? So much of your life is about making things that connect with people, and reading a comment isn't the same as looking in somebody's eyes as they sing back your lyrics at the top of their lungs in the middle of a concert, right? So it's a very different experience. So I love this uplift in the musicality of them talking about dreaming and again escaping into dreams and night and darkness. Of that's where they, them and their fans have made this safe space for themselves, right? As they've talked about all the way back in the Nightmare storylines of let's make this place for us that is quiet and dark and not where other people are going to go, but it's for us, and it has solitude, and we can confide each other and see the beauty in that darkness. Even though other people might not understand or like it, it's where we are connected to each other, and like having that every space time, like the idea of like being in space and galaxies, and every night I dream of you, even if you pass me by, right? Even if you're not engaging with me in that moment, there's still this connection between us. I'm still making stuff for you in mind, right? The songs that they're creating is with the idea that this is going to be something that their fans enjoy, and they're like considering that as part of it. And then The Wind Blows is great. It feels like that battle cry of this will pass, right? And I think that it'll probably be really fun at a concert. I know that there are live performances of this. Like I was saying, I feel like this, like the crowd shouting this is like a great energy of this moment is going to pass. And again, Handong is back in the group for this because she could come back to South Korea. So we're coming to a time where it feels like we can progress forward and not be stuck on pause as we were for so long. Just so good. Like the instrumentation is this mixture of this really gritty, very tech sounding music, and then these more ballad moments and these uplifting musical notes. It's just a wonderful mix, because it is that mixture of confusion that we had at the time, right? You have to put this in the context of when it was released, of none of us really knew. We'd have these moments of like, yeah, we can go, we can do stuff, we can see people that we haven't for a while, and then we have to go back and be in lockdowns again and be separated. And there was so much like up and down of that for so long before we could find a little bit of a balance. I think that there's still things that we're ironing out the wrinkles for, but it's just really interesting, like musically. And again, those stutters in the music. Like that's a nasty drop. Ooh, there's choreo for this. Dang. Like, ooh, okay, look, Handong, you're gonna give me shivers again, but I gotta go back. I love all the cosmic imagery, not just because I'm a space nerd, but it feels really interesting because we've had the imagery that we've had before that was like about stars very much felt like this person standing on Earth looking up at the sky and seeing these spots of light above them, right? But bringing in all of this stuff of black holes, dimensions, galaxies feels a lot more, you've ascended above it in some ways. It's expanding out beyond that, which I think, again, is very telling of their progression as a band. Like they're, again, becoming far more popular. So they have risen above where they were before. I also think like rising above it, right? Like rising above the noise and the city lights and clouds, like anything that might separate them from their fans, and them being like, we're going to bypass all of that. Instead of trying to see past all of this, we're just going to go above it and be in our own quiet space now that isn't this like galactic space of there's no way for that to be obscured, and there's no way for that to be like infiltrated, because it's just like our own kind of vacuum, literally, of us having our own space, which I think is really interesting. And it shows the progression that they've had throughout, I think, the previous albums in this series, of them having like all these struggles that they're lining up, and then being like, but at the end of the day, our fans are our fans, and those are the people that we should be focusing on, and the people that we want to be focusing on, the people that we want to be spending time on. We don't have time for the people who aren't really our fans, who have all these judgments, who have all these expectations. We're beyond it at that point. We've lasted this long. We've made a good career for ourselves. We have this devoted fan base. Those are the people that we want to be making stuff for and spending time with. The rest of it's just noise. The rest of it's just distraction. And that's not what we want, and that's not what we need. And at the end of the day, that's what being a fan of any group, K-pop or otherwise, is supposed to be about. Is like, we are here to be entertained and to escape for a little while and to connect through art and acknowledge shared experiences. And making it about all these other things is just like a waste of energy and time, like fan wars and pitting different people against each other and having all of these, I don't know, like spending all this energy and time on like negativity, when you can just not engage. Like, if you don't like a group, don't listen to them, don't watch their stuff. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's in fact very easy to not do that and to spend your time on stuff that you do like. It's a really cool image to bring into it, of this like literally rising above all of that and finding yourself in this like cosmic place instead. I love the panic in the city too, given what's happening in the world. All those like snaps coming in. Ooh, Xian. Ooh, Gina's vibrato there is gorgeous. All gorgeous vibratos there. Ooh. Oh, okay, I know we're getting into some other stuff. I know we're building up, but I want to talk about some lyrics. Love the "you and I." Baby, you and I. Immediately I'm like, come back. But also, we've had "Hanging on the Edge of a Cliff" a few times. They've talked about finding themselves holding on. I can't think, there's a few ones, B-sides, previous albums. Which ones was it where they've talked about like hanging off of a cliff? But we've had that imagery a couple of times. Love the "ride on a figment of memory." That's so poetic and beautiful, even in the translation. Love that, especially since we have a song later on this that's going to be about memory, at least from the title. That idea of losing oneself, especially since they've talked about that, of losing oneself in the image of social media, not just in terms of the way that you represent yourself, but the way that you're perceived, right? You don't get to choose how people see you. You can just present yourself forward, and then other people get to interpret that however they want. And when you have people who don't actually follow your work and haven't been there the whole time, they have a certain idea of who you are. I've had this on a much smaller scale with even my channel, where people come in to a video, this is their first video, and they have certain assumptions that they make about me, and I'm like, no, but I explained that in this video. I'm like, oh, but that wasn't in this video, and you haven't looked at those other ones, so you don't actually know that I've already talked about this. I've already had that example and talked about why I have this specific idea or thought or concept in my head. You don't have that string, unlike people who have already watched those videos and they followed me for a little while. It's a similar thing of you lose yourself in terms of there's only so much I can communicate in a single video of who I am or my experience as a fan of anything, Dreamcatcher in this case, but any of the videos that I make. I'm like, I can't explain to you my thoughts of every other Dreamcatcher thing that I've watched in a single video. We'd be here too long. I already make super long videos, so I can't explain and put into context literally every single experience that I've had. It's difficult to have this very simplistic image of you portrayed because there's a limit to what you can express through social media and the way that people engage with you when they haven't spent a bunch of time with your previous stuff that you've made. They've talked about that, losing themselves in terms of that perception, as well as just losing yourself in terms of like when you have so many people telling you stuff over and over again, you start to think, is there some validity to that? Is that actually something that is true about who I am? And if those are negative, that can be very debilitating because you have to step back and take that time to be like, wait, is this an actual true thing about me? And I just didn't realize, I didn't know. And that can be really off-putting and difficult to deal with, especially when a bunch of people decide that you're the bad guy in the story. I don't know how much of that they've actually experienced firsthand, but this has been like, they've projected this on a whole experience of K-pop, especially again, the time period of what was going on in K-pop for a lot of these albums was some really awful, horrific things in which some idols were made to be the bad guy in a story that ended very tragically for them. And it's really difficult to have that loss, like that loss of identity taken from you because people see you as this very simplistic caricature of who you actually are. So this idea of writing on a figment of memory of I need to get back to the people who actually know me and the people who have spent the time to get to know me and who have listened to their previous work and been there for multiple steps of it. And even if you haven't been there, maybe this is, you started with Odd Eye, maybe this is your first album with Dreamcatcher, okay, but did you go back and listen to a bunch of their stuff before you were like, let me pass judgment on who they are as people? Hopefully that's what you did. You got some context for what was going on before you had a specific idea of who they were. Like maybe you were intrigued, maybe you had certain ideas about who they were when you first saw them, and then later on, once you had gone back and looked at their work and seen the other things that they had done, you could change that perspective because you had more context for it. Just like really beautifully done. And like just again, the instrumentation, they all sound great, beautiful vibrato from lots of them. Love that they're digging into some of the ballad delivery of it. I just think that's a great contrast with some of the darker sounds that we've got in some of their other stuff. I always like when they go a little bit ballad on me just because it's like, it's just a flex, right? It's, they lean so much into those darker concepts and the rock sounds, and then they can just take out these gorgeous ethereal vocals and they're just like, hang on, let's just show off for a second. Love that gravity. We got like this cosmic imagery and then this bringing back down to earth. Like that's nasty production. The production team really is my ultimate bias. That wind down. Ooh, ad lib, come on. Xian, please. Love bring this back. Whew. Production on that was fantastic. I've said it over and over again. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's their production team that I'm really in love with. They're like, they're so good. That's why I love the intros. I'm like, I gush about them because I love the production side of all their stuff. Nasty instrumentation. Love that we have this like breakdown EDM inspired sound contrasting with these like very uplifting, again, like feels like it's an OST mixed in with it. Love all of Xian's little ad-libs, are she's always so good. Suha sounded fantastic, getting some more belting vocals from her as well. Gayeon also sounded great. She had some beautiful vibrato when she got to do part of the chorus that really matched well with Yuhyun. Usually already has some vibrato in the way that she does her delivery. It comes out a lot more when she does softer vocals because it gets this beautiful emotion, not to deviate too much. But she had it, and Jio also, I was like, oh, she has gorgeous vibrato here. And I love that Gayeon, who usually has fairly steady delivery in the way that she does her vocals, was bringing that in as a way of matching the delivery between them, even though they have different tones and they're approaching it in their own way. It's like this nice little bridge between all of their vocals, which is really great. Great song. I'm like, there's choreo for this. I know there is, because there's like a dance practice or something, which makes me very excited with that kind of instrumentation, especially with the like shouting. I'm assuming the like wind blows is something that they're gonna have the crowd do, or they're gonna have the backing track depending on production that they're performing at, if it's a live setting, which means that they will probably get to just dance during that part, which makes me very excited to see what they might do for that. But great song. I think it ties in a lot of the concepts that they've been going into previously with this, again, uplifting feeling of this too shall pass. And I think that's a really nice thing to have after the way that Odd Eye ended. And I was like, that's a little ominous, a little darker than I would have liked. Speaking of pictures that make me question my existence, what are these? Dio, please. calm down. Calm down. So they all look great. I could just go down the line and be wrecked repeatedly. However, Poison Love, what does that mean? We've just established a nice uplifting moment of them being like, I'm going to find a way to reconnect with the people that actually matter moving forward. And I'm like, that's a nice note after the ominous feeling of the Odd Eye music video, at least. Poison Love makes me feel like something happened. Maybe? I don't know anymore. Why are you beginning with Dami? Why you gotta do that to me? That's my question. Ooh. Interesting lower vibe. Ooh. Oh, look, I shivers. Okay, this is what we're doing? This is what we're doing? Interesting. Much lower vibe. More lo-fi. It has this really heavy bass in it, which I love. I love me a good beat pad. But subdued vocals from them. Beautiful Sua at the beginning. Nice little quaver in her voice to really bring that emotion in. Interesting. This, again, synthy, but it has almost lo-fi feeling. It has a dark sound, something that you listen to when it's like late at night and you're stuck in your own thoughts, which kind of feels like what we're getting into from like the lyrical content of this person finds their way in to make me trust them. They always seem to break down my walls. They always seem to find a way in. And given the title of Poison Love makes me think that is probably not going to be a good thing, that this person seems to find their way in. They know how to find those cracks in your armor. And a very different vibe from I think anything I've heard from them up to this point. Far more in that pop realm. We'll see what happens as we get into the chorus and stuff, but really interesting. Also love the cries that we were getting from Gahyun's vocals as well. Ooh, okay, I know that we're about to get into the rap. I know. But that covering my ears, so interesting to me. This idea of, again, noise or warning. I've talked before about the instrumentation. It feels like sirens going off. Like you know that there's a problem, but like covering your ears, not wanting to hear, not wanting to see, not wanting to accept that there's an issue here because you want to believe in they talked about enchanted. You want to believe in the illusion before you. You want to believe that this is actually true, what you're feeling on the surface. You want to believe that this is love and that you could trust this person. And then having these warnings going off, like you're seeing the red flags and yet you're not listening to them is really interesting. And I feel like, again, it could just be a love song. I know whenever I dig deeper into it, people are like, it's just a love song. I was having like someone who's, I think it's just a love song. I'm like, fine, whatever. If you want to believe that, fine. I'm just like offering some additional perspectives. Like it probably could just be a love song, but it could also be something else. And I think that that's an interesting way to at least try a mental exercise of, can I make it something else? But if we're talking about through the lens of like social media or like the industry of being a K-pop idol, I think that there is something to be said of trusting people or having people seem like there's someone that you can trust and then having that not turn out the way that you thought. You know, like I've said, like it takes one wave of people believing in something or simplifying something to make you the bad guy, right? It just takes that one, and that's like a fear in for a lot of K-pop idols is like you do one thing and suddenly your entire career is over. And it can be something that's not even your fault, right? It can be that someone has made up a rumor that you have done something. And because of that, the company's just like, your image is ruined now. Bye. If they have even the bare bones of canceling your contract, they can. And sometimes they will. And they'll kick you out. Suddenly you don't have that anymore. Or the entire fandom can suddenly be against you. And you're like, this isn't even true. This is just a thing that someone made up. Or it's not a huge thing. And yet it becomes a huge thing. And suddenly you're the villain. And you're like, I thought that I had that support system. I thought that this was something I could trust. I thought that this was actually love. And it turns out that's not what's there. Again, that could not be what the song is about at all. I'm just saying you could look at it through that lens, especially if you were connecting it to the rest of the songs in the album, or again, I haven't listened to the whole album yet, so I don't fully know, or the previous albums linking all of these concepts together. I just think it's really interesting sonically. I really feel like this is out of pocket for them in a really good way. I love when they just do things like stuff that if it was any other K-pop group, I'd be like, ooh, this is nice and this is interesting, but it's within kind of what I would expect from them. But because it's Dreamcatcher and they do so many other things and they have the whole like rock alternative concept, that when they push into these more pop zones and do them really like expertly, but with this like kind of like darker tinge to them, it's really fascinating to me. I love that pullback. Yuyeon, please. Ooh. No, ma'am, wait. Love the subdued delivery of the like, why do you, and like that repetition. It's almost this tired, exhausted, broken down delivery, right? This is something that's happened over and over and over again, and yet you're still here, and yet you're still doing the same thing. You're like stuck in this cycle because they always rope you back in, right? Again, the poison love, this idea they talked about every time our lips meet, my pain goes away. There's this cyclical feeling to the whole experience. So this feeling of exhaustion coming through in the way that they're, again, repeating like you. This is the thing that you are doing over and over and over again. And I'm tired of it. And yet I keep being stuck here. I'm still here. I think that's just, it's fascinating delivery. And we have the cloudier, again, wind blows right before this, of kind of cloud cover, and eventually this too will pass, but having this feeling of being stuck in that place. The vocal delivery from Yuyeon here, of the lower range with the like vocal fry in there a little bit. I need her to not do that. Am I gonna listen to it again? Yes. Okay, sometimes I don't have a good sense of self-preservation. Also, what do you mean that this is a self-made MV? Like, this is like a intense, there's like a dance, almost like club feeling to it. Again, like escapism, darker, subdued feeling to this. And you're like, they're gonna be super chaotic on this. Just pure chaos on this particular track. I like that they do that. Like, not only that they have a super chaotic self-made MV, but that they usually pick the fairly emotionally intense one, like this B-side, and then they're just pure chaotic mess in green rooms. There's just something very poetic about that I love. Okay, one more time from the top. Interesting, like that, like sample coming, it's like horns. I need Xian to also not deliver that line like that. Every day I feel love. 무기력해지지도 밥을 먹다가도 모두 변한 비고 난 다시 잠에 들어. 이제 어느샌가 기계적인 생각. You're the only way I'm sorry. Not you giving me rapper Gaihyun again. Also, again, the apathy in their voices. Again, like literally saying that in the lyrics from Dami. I think she said like apathetic specifically. If I can find the lyrics. Hold, please. Lethargic is what she says. There's this apathy to their voice. They're just stuck and worn down and are still here. This feeling of constantly being tired, which I feel like one is being worn out by the cyclical nature of this. It just keeps repeating and I'm stuck here and I don't understand why. I can't understand why we can't get out of this cycle. And again, if we're talking about a romantic relationship, there's some red flags here. There's some issues going on with this, some manipulation going on. If we're talking about social media, it can feel very much like that too. Of social media as a double-edged sword of you being able to connect with people who legitimately care about the stuff that you're making, and a lot of people who don't, and are going to tell you very loudly that they do not care for the things that you're making. So it's, but you get addicted to it, right? Like you keep coming back to seeing the numbers and reading the comments and engaging with it, and it could feel very difficult not to engage with the negativity because you want to defend yourself, right? You want to give more context for who you are as a person and the stuff that you make. You want to defend it because it matters to you. And when people attack your character, you're like, hang on, that's not who I am. And you keep engaging, right? You keep coming back to it, even though it's no good for you. There could be that connection too. It could be like industry wise too, of it can sometimes feel like rinse and repeat of doing any kind of job. As someone who has done performance, it can get to you. If you're doing the same play, that's from my experience anyway, performing on stage, you do it every day over and over and over again, and sometimes you do it more than once a day. At a certain point you're like, oh my god, I just want to sleep and be left alone and not have to do this, because it can be a lot after a while, and you just have to smile and perform and go through the motions again. Much like any job, right? There's a certain repetition to any kind of job that you're doing, that they're just things that you have to do over and over again, and it can feel very repetitive and make you question, do I actually like this? Do I actually enjoy this? Especially with performance, right? So there's a couple of different ways that you can take from this, but I think it's interesting that it talks about wanting to go back to sleep again. If we're talking about all of the dream imagery that is overarching with Dreamcatcher, is they talk about dreams as being the escape, being their safe space. Again, we can go into generally when people are dealing with depression or apathy, sleep can be something that they do a lot of. Sleeping, spending time in bed, this escape from reality and what they're feeling, and sometimes it can feel better to be stuck in dreams and or to not experience anything at all than to be experiencing the apathy that you're feeling when you're awake. So that's like a more complicated issue there. But I think pulling from their dream imagery, their escape into dreams has always been like a safe space between them and fans, right? It's this idea of we can escape into this dream place or even into these nightmares, and even though it'll scare other people off or it's not for other people, it's like our own individual safe space. So it's like this needing to disconnect with real life and instead have that escapism. And again, pulling from our experience as K-pop fans, I think that can be an issue too. Like, I think a lot of the issues that we have of fans centering idols or groups too much in their life is because they pull away from the things that are going on in their life that they can't process through, that they're having difficulties with, and escape into a certain group or a certain singer to the point where it becomes such an important part of their life because they've pulled away from everything else, that they've isolated themselves within it. And that can be a very difficult thing to deal with too. And it's just like a lot of complex different angles to this that I'm just like, I don't know if I finished a thought in any of that, but this interesting idea of it could also be fans of them that are lost in engaging with their content and being a fan that they stay in dream too much and aren't able to actually go out and live their life and have other experiences. And it could also be for them too, of being too sucked into being Dreamcatcher, of being idols, of being K-pop performers, that they lose those connections to other things like hobbies and friends and family and other experiences that are just for them to be living their life, that doesn't have anything to do with them being a member of Dreamcatcher, right? So I think that there's lots of different ways that you can interpret this song and this experience. I think ultimately it's about feeling like there was something that you love and you keep finding yourself going back to, and yet there's this poison in it too, right? There's this dark side to it that is not as fulfilling as it's supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be something that fills your cup and brings you joy, and it isn't the way that it was before, but you keep coming back because it did once, and you're hoping that if you just keep coming back, it'll make you feel that happy again, and you can apply that to lots of different experiences, right? And I need a break from like Ahyun coming for me, especially with this really light, breathy delivery that she has. Again, this exhaustion, this apathy in the delivery.
Every day I feel low. 무기력해지지도 답을 못 나가도 모두 다 남기고 난 다시 잠에 들어. 이제 어느샌가.
I'm thinking like a machine, like you're pulling from your emotions. It feels too familiar. Yeah, but like I'm getting addicted, like it's not fulfilling anymore. Ooh. The delivery, I was gonna get chills anyway, but I was like chills because before I was talking about both ears covered. I was like, yeah, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil feeling. So I was like, oh, covering your eyes, covering your ears. If I don't pay attention to the warning signs, it's fine. And then they're like covering both eyes. I'm like, ah. Look, sometimes I'm off base and I have no idea what a song is about, and other times, sometimes I pick up on things. The delivery of Again, though, from Xian. Beautiful. Also, I don't know what it is about Sua and Xian when they sing together. It makes my whole body shiver. There's just something about their voices blending that I'm just like, that's it. Does that make sense to anyone else? There's just like certain voices together in this group that you're just like, yeah, that just makes sense to me. It bops though. I feel bad to dance along. It's really ominous, like brass instrument though. The way that she says that line though.
Sure and no, sure and no. You'll never be mine. 단 한 번도, 단 한 번도. 처음부터 먼저 날 바라본 적이 없었던. 처음부터 먼저 날 바라본 적이 없었던.
Vocal melody.
바라본 적이 없었던. 너로 늘도 찾아가.
Oh, the percussion coming in. Dang, look, the production on this is nasty, this album. Dang, okay, I gotta reposition myself. I was like, I hope we get some club beats in this, some rave feeling music. And they're like, we got you. I love that it's leaning so much into the electronic and pop synthy feeling of it, because it does very much contrast with some of their other vibes. And I feel like it's, again, this like transition into like digital over that like tactile analog feeling that like rock music is associated more with. But I love this like repetition, like this "you've never lied." I think it interesting. Is it that they've never lied, or is it just like you've been told over and over again that you should trust them, that it's "sure I know"? This, again, a great use of repetition of this, because it has like this cyclical feeling, right? Is it actually that the person's never lied, or is it just this manipulation to the point of, I know that I should trust you, I get it, I understand? You know what I mean? Like that manipulation of almost like brainwashing to the point where you like, you know, gaslighting, right? Like where you're like, yeah, look, obviously I must be wrong, and this was always the truth. This was always what you meant. Or is it like an actual admission of, I understand that it's always been obvious that this wasn't going to be good for me, and I fell for it anyway, right? It's almost like self-destruction. I feel like it could probably be like multiple. I also really like that it feels like they've just taken the same vocal section and they've actually repeated it. It's not them recording multiple takes in a row. It's like the same one, and it has this clipped feeling to it, which I think is really good too, because it's like this stuttering, again, like we had in the intro, these stutters and false starts and like repetition and build up being repeated, not only in the production side of these songs, but also in like the vocal delivery of, again, being stuck in the same place, stuck in the same cycles, stuck doing the same things, repeating the same thoughts over again when we had like different people singing the same parts, right? Gorgeous melody, by the way, just a fantastic vocal melody that they all sang beautifully. But it's like this idea of, right, you're telling yourself over and over again, this is bad for me, this person is not the right person, you've never looked at me first, I keep coming back to you, and I know that's what I should not be doing, and that's not how I should be behaving, but I keep coming back because it's an addiction. It's a needing to come back and hoping that it'll be better this time, hoping that you'll find that spark that you had the first time that made this something that you wanted to be a part of. And I just think that's fascinating. And then like cry of like, I'll go back again, like I know. Whew. Vocals. Dang, I love the layering of the ad-libs there, because it's contrasting to that lower register and the more monotone delivery with that, this almost like internal back and forth dialogue. I also think it's interesting, I was thinking at the end when it was like, why do you, going back to Dami at the beginning, and I was like, this seems addressed to someone else at that part, but now I'm like, maybe it's to yourself. It's acknowledging that internal monologue of knowing that something isn't good for you, knowing that going back to it isn't going to make it better. It's not good for you. No amount of going back over and over and over again is going to magically change it. What's the phrasing? The definition of stupidity is doing something over and over again and expecting a different result. A feeling of, you know what the result is going to be, and yet you keep coming back to them, right? The Xian's line of, I'll go back to you again today. And then we have the why do you? And it's, okay, why do myself, to myself, why do you keep doing this? Like, why do you keep making yourself cry? Why do you keep making yourself hurt? Why do you keep breaking yourself down? I know that it also is probably in relation to some other person, some other kind of external force that is also causing that pain. But it's like, you keep coming back, right? You keep taking the first step and going back to the situation, and it's breaking you apart, it's making you cry, it's hurting you, and yet you keep going back. So why do you do that? I just think that's an interesting turn of, again, whatever the intention may be, that like at the beginning of the song that line had a very different meaning, and then at the end of the song we're repeating it, but I'm like, ooh, now I feel like there's a different context for that delivery, and it could be both, right? Like, it could be both simultaneously. So I find that fascinating, but love the song. Like, I love the direction that they're going with this album that feels far more poppy, which I know that they've done in some of their other stuff, more like recent comeback stuff, like Villains. They leaned more into some of the pop elements, but this feels more like club feeling, which I think is really interesting, especially with the darker concepts that it feels like they're digging into for a lot of it, of internally, right? There's a lot of darker internal monologues of, I don't know, going through things and the isolation in a lot of it, which I think is interesting with a club vibe, which is, we think of like a crowded place, and yet everyone is strangers and trying to escape from something. It's just a fascinating image that we're creating, even just sonically. I just saw that I've been recording for an hour. Will I ever get to a point where that doesn't shock me? Maybe. It's like, my voice is kind of sore from talking. How long could it have possibly been? An hour. And we still have 2 more songs. Y'all knew this. You signed up for this, okay? It's fine. Okay, wait, 4 Memory. Now, we've already had some mentions of Memory. Makes me a little bit interested in what this is going to be, because 4, in my brain, my Western understanding, 4 is like a number of stability, because 4 seasons, 4 elements, 4 directions, right? 4 means stability and balance. But I also know that in Korean culture, 4 has a negative connotation to it, like a bad luck feeling to it. There's a lot of superstition around 4. So I wonder if that'll come into it too, especially after the previous song, which is like finding yourself stuck in a situation that you know is bad for you, and yet you're still stuck there. I don't know. Ooh. Oh, I just said like 4 seasons. Okay, first off, love the pullback of this acoustic that we're bringing in. Love that we're talking about the seasons, right? And we had Tio's part also was talking about the seasons. I was smiling because we have the fly high, fly on the high winds. So we have the winds before. We're talking about wind blows, getting above all of like the clouds, which we had also imagery in here, and getting above all of the noise and all the things that are happening, and finding that solitude above it all, and not trying to fight to see through it, and instead rising above it. Interesting, but also fly high. For, again, pulling back all the way, which feels like we've done like a few times. We've referenced, I feel like, earlier songs a couple of times in this, which I think is interesting, to be like going back to your roots, right? Which what I'm feeling of them being like, I want to reconnect, which feels like it might be this one too, of I want to reconnect with the people who are actually my fans, who have gone back and they've either experienced a bunch of their previous music in real time, or they've gone back and appreciated it in retrospect, like I have, of understanding the stuff that has come before, that has built up to this point. I want to reconnect with those people instead of getting distracted by all of this noise and barriers and other stuff going on. I don't want to be distracted by all of that, because that's not what I'm making music for. That's not what I'm being an idol for. I'm making things for the people who actually care about the stuff that I'm creating, and care enough to go back and try to understand everything that's come before and the progression to get to this point. So I think that's interesting, but the I'm not fine makes me think that there's something is gone on. Visible behind those clouds is, again, bringing the cloud imagery. Maybe. Hopefully it's like we reconnect and are good, possibly. I love this almost like acoustic sound though, like it feels more analog. Ooh. Oh, interesting. The vocal sample, again, like very digital. I was talking about, it feels more analog now because we have the acoustic guitar coming in. Tons and tons of digital instrumentation before this, right? Very synth heavy, very MIDI sampling of digital instruments, and then coming back to a moment of that analog feeling of an acoustic guitar and a more stripped back sound, again still mixed with those electronic sounds and like distortion, but having something that feels literally more grounded, more tactile is really interesting. Love the breakdown. The vibes of this is really great, especially with the imagery of autumn and summer and winter, and this idea of again coming back to tactile experiences like being at a bonfire or being outdoors and like the seasons and in nature, if we're talking about the different times of year and like the weather and stuff, like that experience of reconnecting with nature and people and experiences and yourself, like having that like tactile sensory connection again is really cool. Also, I feel like we have lots of different references to previous songs and lyrics, and I won't be able to pinpoint all of them, so if there is someone who knows more of that than me, but I know Frozen Hands we've had before, we've talked about that. I also feel like the rain we've talked about a few times. Summer Nights is the next album, has something to do with summer. Is it Summer Nights? The next EP, I hope I'm remembering correctly. So it feels like we're moving on to something with that as well. But I think it's really interesting to have that. And like with this distorted vocal sample, I think it's really interesting with almost this overlapping memory. And the fact that you're remembering something means that you're already distorting that experience, right? Like you're never going to remember something the way that it actually was. It is always going to be through the lens of the experiences that you've had since that thing happened and the way that experience made you feel, right? So there's always going to be this distortion to the way that we remember things, but that doesn't mean that it isn't beautiful or meaningful or impactful or something that we can carry forward with us. And there's always a bittersweetness to that because we can't go back. You don't get to have that moment again, but you do get to hold on to it and have it shape the way that you interact with other people and the rest of your life. It's just really cool concept, and it very contrasting to the previous songs. We got really dark sonically and delivery wise with the previous song of Poison Love, and conceptually going into this one that has even just like a pictures chosen or like a much brighter feeling, a much brighter sound sonically, and having that feeling of reconnecting with tactile experience and an actual experience with nature and life and being out in the real world as opposed to that kind of digital space, which I think is really cool. I love the layered vocal too. It's like a darker, like this distorted like vocal track behind it. This is very much giving Porter Robinson, whom I love. Oh, that distortion on now. The clock sound again. Oh, vocals. Ooh. Not you giving me Dami vocals. I was already like, gosh, the vocals are gorgeous here. But my head is filled with you floating in a deep sea. Interesting. But I also feel like I'm getting almost some sad vibes. Like it feels like a reconnection, but it also feels like a little bit sad again, knowing some of the context of things that were going on in the K-pop industry in memory. I don't know what it's, I can't remember exactly what is in Korean belief systems, but I think it's very similar. I was having conversations with people about this as Japanese ones, where in Japanese is shi, and shi is another word for death. So a lot of the time they will use yun instead as for the number 4, because you don't want to like bring the bad luck of speaking of death by using shi. So I think it's a similar thing in Korean. And if that is part of it, being like the memory associated with a loss, and again, with stuff that was going on in the K-pop industry, it feels a little bit bittersweet, but also this feeling of being able to move on, have that memory. And I'm going to not be sad. I'm not going to cry talking about my own interpretation of the song. This may or may not be actually accurate, but being able to take that loss forward, again, having those memories and having those shape the way that you engage with the world now, you got to have them. Right? You got to spend time with that person. And even them talking about the seasons feels like time passing of I've gone through a length of time now that I am able to now move forward and not be stuck in this place of loss or grief or sadness at not getting to go back to when those memories happen. I get to remember them and take those memories with me and create new experiences now. Maybe, even though now I want to say I've been saving the things that I want to say. I feel like that very much fits with when you go through a loss of like you not even knowing how to respond to it or like how to voice what you're feeling or what you're experiencing because it's all consuming, and then getting to a point where you're like, I feel like I can actually properly articulate what that experience was in retrospect because I'm separated enough from the initial shock of having lost something to now. And whether or not that is like an actual grief loss of a person or if it's just a loss, even in the context of what was going on in the world of, hey, they were going to be releasing music, they were going to be going on tours, they were going to be performing shows, they were going to be doing promotional stuff, they were going to be engaging with fans, like all of these plans and schedules, everything got canceled. Everything was not happening and nothing was happening. And you had to stay put where you were by yourself, isolated, and no one knew when there was going to be an endpoint. That is a loss. That is a grief. That is a trauma that we have all collectively gone through of what do you do when all of that happens, right? I think that we're all still trying to figure that out. It hasn't been that long since 2020 happened. And I think we're all still trying to re-find our footing of what happened. And we're starting to see some of the longer term effects of having gone through that global experience. And I think that that is also could be part of it of I lost all of these things that I had planned and I was looking forward to and that I imagined was going to happen. And then everything stopped. And so many awful things happened in the span of that, right? It's not like just because things got canceled and we were all staying in our own homes that other things didn't happen in the world and that other things haven't happened since. So it's like this overwhelm of like, how do you continue forward in this like new way of experiencing the world, having gone through that? And I think we're still trying to figure it out. I think that's still something that we're going to be dealing with for a while. And it's still wild to think about it. I don't know about you guys, but thinking about 2020, I'm like, that was a real thing that we actually went through. Like a thing that will be in textbooks and that people will ask us about when we're old. Be like, was that was a thing that actually happened? Yeah. That was a thing that I experienced in real time. How wild is that? But I'm not going to make myself sad about thinking about other things. Okay? But still a super uplifting, hopeful song of I get to move on now and have other experiences, even though there is this feeling of, I think of like deep sea as this idea of, I know it's floating in. So there is a feeling of being submerged, but also you're not drowning in it, right? Like it's still this idea of I haven't fully moved on from these mixture of like feelings and sadness that I have, but my head is above water and that's an improvement. That's pretty nice to not feel as if you're drowning in everything that has happened and to be able to say the things that you want to say. And I don't know, it's like a mixture of things, right? Like it has a bittersweet feeling to it. Yeah, like it slips through your fingers like sand we talked before. I always loved Dami vocals. Yuhyun. I like to remember it all too. Again, remember the good and like remember the bad and the good. They could also be fans too. Like, okay, before we get like a nasty drop here at the end, again, like we talking about going through 2020 and everything being canceled and there's the separation, I feel like it could go and lean into that with the fans of I want to be with you now. We have this chance to actually get to go to concerts and have fan meets, and I'm very jealous every time that someone tells me about it. The number of times I'm like, oh, I want to see them in concert, and then I saw them in concert for this, or I got to go to a fan meet, or people share pictures of my Discord. I'm like, it's great, I'm super happy for you, but I'm also extremely jealous. I'm so jealous because the one time that they were in Montreal, I had other life stuff going on and I didn't get to go see them. Now we get to have those experiences, and I think that it's nice to be like, yeah, we went all through this and we had those memories, and there are things that we're gonna have to carry forward, and it's not gonna be the same. We don't get to go back to what it was like before, unfortunately. Even just a year ago, we don't get to go back. There are things that have happened and the only way is forward. But also when we got scared, we were there to take care of each other and to support each other. Hopefully, as humanity as a whole, there are definitely some questionable moments in there, but hopefully we had people who were looking out for each other, and Dreamcatcher had each other and they had their fans had them, and I think that's also a beautiful thing we got to this point, right? A lot of crazy stuff was going on, and here we are. There's some good stuff going on. There's some bad. There's quite a bit of bad, but there's also some great stuff, and it's nice that we get to do things like concerts and fan meets and get more music and live performances and get to this point after all of that turmoil. It's just nice.
네가 있고 내가 있던 모든 순간을 잊지 마.
With that strumming of the guitar. Woo! Sian. Need them to not come for me with those ad libs between Ian and Xian. I'm like, stop. Don't come for me like that. I have mixed feelings at the end of that. And I think that's like the point of the song is like there's this feeling of acknowledging a loss, acknowledging that things have happened and that it's not going to be the same and that there have been dark times and hardships, and this isn't even something we can say, oh, my experience or your experience or Dreamcatcher's experience. Like 2020 was a global thing. I'm not trying to make it all about that. I know that this could apply to lots of different instances, but we all globally went through a lot in 2020, literally every single person. And we can't just ignore that happened. We don't get to just forget that is something that we all experienced. And now we have to find a way to go forward. And it doesn't mean that we should forget about those memories or we should push them away. There are things that we learned and experienced, and we can take those lessons forward and hopefully do other better things, maybe optimistically. And it's not necessarily all bad from the things that we've experienced, right? Even them talking about in the song of in those moments of being scared, you held my hand and I held yours, right? This idea of knowing who you can rely on and that you can get through things, and that even in any kind of dark experience that I think any of us have gone through, as someone personally who has their own mental health things, if you can afford it, therapy's good, is you have those darker moments and you know who you can rely on, who you can trust, and more importantly, that you can trust yourself in a lot of instances. I think that's something that I've really come to terms with, of realizing in context that my body and my brain were doing the best they could with what they had. And that there's a certain appreciation for that I didn't have before. I think I focused a lot on the negativity of my own brain and my own body and feeling this betrayal of it. And in the end, I have 100% success rate of getting through stuff, getting to a point where I'm like still here and I'm still good and I still have things that bring me joy and people who care about me. And I'm like, that's pretty good, actually. So it's a lesson to bring forward through those dark moments. And I hope that other people know that too and can experience that. And I think that's part of what they're trying to communicate with this song, is that those feelings and those memories are valid. And it doesn't mean that those dark things didn't happen, that you can then move forward and find joy and find hope and inspiration and keep moving forward, which is nice. Again, after the kind of darker tones that we've had, to have something that is a little bit more on the optimistic side of things. What do you mean we've been here for an hour and a half and I still have another song to get through? Honestly, I don't know how you put up with me. I can't put up with myself. I'm gonna have to edit this and I'm gonna be thoroughly frustrated like half an hour in. Anyway, New Days, that sounds very optimistic, which I like. I was hoping that New Days would be this uplifting moment of, we had a little bit of a lift in For Memory and now it feels like we got the soft pictures again. So I'm assuming that we're gonna also be like, hey, we get to keep going forward and to experience new things and have fresh starts and a new chance at stuff whilst bringing those memories and those experiences with us. We'll see though. Ooh, it's giving like end credits OST again with like the guitars again. We're bringing that back in. Yeah, let's go. I was talking about the lack of guitars earlier on. Oh my god, it just took off and it's just going forward. All right, This is what I needed. Okay, all the rock sounds with the guitars. This is more of a, I don't know, classic Dreamcatcher sound, and I love that. Especially, I was talking about in the intro, I'm like, it's really crazy that there aren't any guitars, physical drums, and like the classic rock sounds in this, because usually we have a mixture of the more synths and the guitars. I'm like, it really feels like this transition into digital and leaving behind the actual, I don't know, roots or connections or tactile experiences. And I'm like, previous song for memory, I'm like, oh, it's nice that we have a little bit of guitar. This one's full on. This is a Dreamcatcher sound to the production, and I love that. I love that they've been doing a bunch of different things on this album. I love that it leaned more into pop sound, but this very dark undertone to everything. I think it fits really well with the story that they were trying to tell, and it lets them expand some of the stuff that they're doing. But this fits way more into that very galloping forward sound, tons of forward momentum. We also have the You and I reference again, going back to previous songs, the acknowledgement of that, this dark night, again, talking about night descending, which is a previous thing. I love this idea of them bringing forward a bunch of the imagery from early on stuff in their music to this point, because it does feel like we're coming back to who we are, right? I was talking about a lot of this album feels like them trying to find their way back to their core fans and the core base of what Dreamcatcher is and what they want the group to be and the band to be. And this whole series of albums has been this kind of exploration of losing oneself and getting caught up in like social media and digital spaces and multiple voices chiming in who don't actually know the context of anything or who you are as a performer or as a person, and losing yourself and all of that noise and traffic. This album feels like it's been a lot of, I need to find my way back to that star, to that place of solitude with the people who actually care about the stuff that I'm making. And this sonically very much fits into that pocket of what we expect from a Dreamcatcher song. And I love that. I love how it had so much deviation previously to this song, but it makes the song hit in a whole different way. The way that I was like, I cheered. I mean, I was like, yeah. Because I'm like, we've had so much deviation from the classic Dreamcatcher sound that it just feels good to be back into the place that I think all of us became fans of Dreamcatcher for, is like the sound of this song and like that galloping forward momentum, and like just so good. You have wind again. Oh, that descending melody. Gorgeous. How did a single syllable make my soul leave my body? How? Why did she have to say what like that? Yun, ma'am, you already own my soul. You don't need to prove it in every song. I get it. People watching this video get it. They've seen the other moments. I had other thoughts. Other thoughts about the storytelling. The growing tired, we've had that in other ones. Poison Love, where they talked about being tired and that being very draining and unfulfilling experience. And then this one is like, when I grow tired, I know that you're going to uplift me. I know that you're going to be there for me, which is a contrast to the relationship or whatever experience was described in Poison Love. I'm like, this is towards fans, so this is the relationship or the connection that is actually going to support me and fill me in a way that other relationships won't. It's a different experience. And then this Will You Wait For Me, we've had that imagery before of trying to find them and being like lost. You'd have lost in mazes and fog and these obscured places and still being able to find each other. I love this idea of time stopping. I know that we've had some of that imagery before of them talking about being stuck in this liminal space. Interesting too, especially since we've had the ticking sound in the previous song, and in the like, when you open your eyes, you had that before of covering the eyes, right? Choosing to cover your eyes in previous songs. And then now it's opening your eyes. You had that of waking up from dream or sleep or whatever. Just interesting all around. I'm too excited about it. And I love that this has a very classic Dreamcatcher sound, but it's not leaning too heavy into the rock sound. Like, it does feel very much more like an OST sound of this very like uplifting, forward momentum, hopeful song. without leaning into some of the like darker tones that some of their like lead singles that are more on the rock side can get into, because there isn't that like self-confidence there, right? There's a certain like self-confidence or like control that some of their lead singles have, that like their B-sides are more about a more like genuine and like deeper connection with like their fans and the messages that they're trying to put forward. Love that back and forth. I mean, right in my chest. Why?
시간이 서툴러 지나 결빛 나지 우리의 만남이 돌아보면 비슷해 감았던 눈을 뜰 때 그 순간 눈앞에 펼쳐져 끝까지 잠깐 잠에 들어 지워져 버린 기억 기지개 켜고 다시 돌이켜보면 지나쳐 사라지고 또 새로운 시간이 흘러가.
Ooh, okay, just like the drum feels great. I love this interesting dynamic. Again, it was Poison Love where Thami talked about falling asleep as an escape, right? It was like this negative thing of I'm so tired and I just want to go back to sleep to escape the apathy. And in this one, it's I fall asleep for a bit as like a reconnection, right? Like they've talked before about in their songs of Dream and escaping into Dream not being a negative thing, of it being like a connection between them and their fans, right? So it's like reclaiming that experience and having it be that connection again, the erased memories coming back to for a memory of having those memories, remembering those experiences, coming back to the things that actually matter and reclaiming those experiences and being able to color them the way that you want to, as opposed to letting someone else have an external control of that experience, which I feel like a lot of the time is with, again, pulling from social media stuff that we've had before. Algorithms decide what you're watching and what you're seeing and what you're engaging with, and it isn't necessarily things that are going to make you happy or things that are actually interesting to you. It's given to you and you're like, you find yourself stuck in that loop, as opposed to actually actively choosing the things that you want to engage with or the things that you want to be involved with. That descending melody is so good. Ooh, you're not gonna hit me right in the chest again. I was like, I'm not ready for Xian. Hit me at the moment, but it feels so much early days song from Dreamcatcher. It's making me, I'm like, some of the choreo from earlier on, I'm like, yeah, that would fit with this Chase Me era. It just, I know that I haven't been here for that long, and I shouldn't be that nostalgic, but I am. Even just like the vocal tone that they're taking on. Oh, even just like holding hands after lockdown stuff, right? Okay, I feel like we're leading into something and you're gonna give me duo vocals, so sorry, but the smiles, I was just thinking of masks before. You couldn't see someone smile, so that you can see someone face to face and you can see them smiling. That was a big deal. Again, holding hands, I didn't think of it before. I'm like, yeah, we couldn't be in contact with anyone, let alone going to like fan meets and being able to actually engage with people, right? Like if they did fan meets, they had the like plexiglass between them and their fans, and everyone was masked and there was, separation there. That it's different now. And even just being like in concerts and being able to like cheer and clap and stuff is like something that we couldn't do for a while. So it is a very different feeling. It didn't even click in my brain. I'm like, oh yeah, holding hands is not just symbolic. It was like a literal thing that we could not do for a while. Again, wild to think back on that time and be like, that was an actual experience. That was real life. Crazy. Her voice though. Minchi, please be gentle. The ad-libs, the victory of saying, I found you. Is that it? Is it over now? Okay. Just making sure. There's like extra time at the end of this. Why did you have to hit me with that note? I was talking about the first time. I'm like, my soul left my body. But you just said that note, did that one syllable. And you had to end. You had to put a little period at the end of this album with that. It's good though. I like a good uplifting, upbeat, again, feels very reminiscent of like early days, like Dreamcatcher debut feeling song, which I love because I think again, it's supposed to be this full circle moment of remembering your roots, remembering why they got into this in the first place, like why they are Dreamcatcher, why they re-debuted, why they worked so hard to have that experience, have that chance and get to this point after a period of literally fracture, right? Handong wasn't there. They had a member missing and they could not connect with people in the same way. They couldn't connect with their families in the same way, their friends, their fans, each other. There was this huge disruption and it changed the way that we socialized and engaged with so many different things in life, even just like nature. We couldn't go outside in the same way that we used to be able to. And there was this fear of outside and getting to a point where you don't have that anymore and you can engage with the things that brought you joy before. And it feels more cohesive of Dreamcatcher like coming together in this song of like even just the passing off between lines. Like there's a more collective feeling to this song because it's supposed to feel that way. It's supposed to have this like uplifting feeling of remembering why they are Dreamcatcher and the importance of them all cohesively being together. And I like this kind of like throwback sound for them, whilst of course also having some more progression there, right? Obviously they don't sound exactly the way that they did at debut. It wouldn't make sense if they did, but it definitely feels like a nod back to that time of let's have a full circle moment. And even just ending off this particular era is interesting, right? We've had this set of albums that this is the end point of it. And it is referencing back to the very beginning of Dreamcatcher as a group. I just think it's really interesting. In the face of seeming dystopia and they're on the road to utopia, it's like what actually matters and what are the things that you need to not forget and what you need to keep you grounded and what is important regardless of everything that's going on in the world and the things that you're going to struggle with. What are the things that actually matter and that you need to keep with you? I feel so much better, so much better having listened to that song after some of the darkness that we've had in this album up to this point. I just realized in a weird turn of events that chronologically, the next song is Eclipse, right? They do the Japanese release that's the OST. I'm like, oh, a lot of these, the last song, New Days, feels like an OST. So I'm like, we're literally leading into an OST with the next song. But also, Eclipse is the first Dreamcatcher song that I listened to on the channel. It's my first Dreamcatcher reaction. And I was just talking about how this feels like a full circle back to the beginning. And it literally is for me. It literally is not planned. Not planned. I did not realize that until I said it and I was looking. I had the thought. I was like, hang on. I think Eclipse is the next song chronologically, which is like a weird coincidence. That's the weird lining up there between the two of them. But I legitimately love that album. I think it did so many new things, interesting things. I think it deviated from what they usually do, which is something that they've done, in going, like they've done that kind of like here and there with B-sides, but they definitely did it with the Villains album. I like that whole album was very much them deviating from Dreamcatcher's sound in a very like deliberate way. It was almost like playing these characters in certain parts of that album, which I found really interesting and like looping back to that with the Virtuous release. But I think that this one did a really cool job of like half and half of like the first half feels a little bit like deviating. It's a little bit, not entirely because Odd Eye is somewhere in there, which leans a little bit more into their sound because it is a single, but it feels like the first half is almost this loss of self and this inner conflict and trying to get unstuck and figure out what the problem is. And then the last half feels more like that reconnection and that kind of being able to go through the work of after you know that there is an issue and you know that you need to get out of it, that now you can move forward. It isn't a full point of I'm better now. It isn't I'm good. There's still this feeling of, one of the lines is I'm not fine, but I understand that there's an issue. I understand that the way to get through it is forward. And at least I have taken a step out of being stuck. I am on the road to it. Road to Utopia. It isn't, we are there. We've met the destination of Utopia, of happiness, of the end point that we want to be at. But we're at least taking the steps there. Like I think it was one of Dami's lines, like being able to see the path forward in New Days. Like there's a path forward and like we could walk on it now. Like we understand that there's like a direction that we should be going in instead of being stuck in this one place and being stuck in this cycle that we can't get out of. That it just, I like having an uplifting moment, but I also like the fact that it isn't like a conclusion of everything's good now, everything's fine, and it's all good. It's like this just like acknowledgement of this is going to be a work in progress, but I'm going to work at it, right? And I think that's a wonderful message of, I think so many of us are struggling. Again, this global experience that we've been through and like all the other stuff that has happened since and is currently going on, that I think we're all in this place of it's going to be a work in progress. I think we're all struggling with different things on varying levels, and unfortunately there is a bit of a shared overarching experience with that, but acknowledging that this is a thing that we can deal with, this is a thing that we can keep moving forward with, and there's just take a step in the direction. It doesn't need to be we finally end up Utopia, we finally end up at happiness. It can be I'm going to take one step towards that, whatever little step that might be. And hopefully after a while, you're going to realize that you've taken 100 steps, 1,000 steps, and that you're a lot closer than you might have thought once you finally look around and take stock of it. I know it was definitely an experience for me. I've struggled with different things, and even just over the last couple of years have been through a lot in my own personal life. And it's crazy to think about, even this time last year, how far I've come and not really realized it until I took a second to look around and be like, no, I'm actually a lot better than I was. And I've taken lots of steps in the right direction to being happier and being more balanced with myself. And I think that's a really great thing to incorporate into this album of, yes, there's this ominous feeling of with Odd Eye, but ending on this note of we don't have to stay there. Just acknowledging that there's an issue and that there's something going on that we don't agree with, or that we're in this darker place, doesn't mean that you have to stay there, doesn't mean you have to put up with it. And it can feel like you're stuck in this storm and stuck with these forces against you, but you do have the choice to take a step forward towards something better. And hopefully if you keep walking and enough people also do that, that maybe we'll get somewhere. And that would be wonderful. I like the optimism of that, and hopefully it is something that we can continue to work on. And I like the message of connecting with what matters and remembering what matters and not letting all of the noise of other people's opinions or voices or comparing yourself to other people get in the way of what makes you happy and what makes you grounded and what actually matters to you and in your experience going through the world. I just feel good after that last song. I feel like I needed that. I think there are so many cool points in that, of production wise and vocal melody wise, that songs that I'll want to listen to over and over again. If I need a pick me up, I feel like New Days might be it. I feel like that might be like my moment of I need like a victory moment of I got this. I feel like that'll be a song that I come back to. But I hope you enjoyed listening to that along with me. You can click this place, go see my previous reactions, or you can subscribe to me next time I post a Dreamcatcher reaction. I will see you in the next video. Bye.